Football Nation. We are going to ground and pound it today with the running backs. I'm going to give you 5 sleepers at the running back position that you can take in the later rounds of your draft to win your fantasy league. But before we get into any of it, be sure to like this video. The likes will help spread the channel on YouTube. The more likes, the more likely YouTube is going to recommend it. Share it on social media, whatever platform you have, whether that be Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, whatever you have, be sure to share it. That also grows the channel. And then subscribe if you have not subscribed already, so that you can get notified whenever a new fantasy football video is out. Like today's, we're going to get into the running back position. Before we get into any of it, remember, I'm going to give a clue or a question at some point during the video today, so be sure to stay tuned, and you will have a chance to win one of my free 2021 NFL fantasy football draft kits. So I'm looking forward to giving that away. Remember, again, it will have my PPR rankings, my non-PPR rankings, potentially my dynasty rankings. I still want to hear from you guys in the comment section whether you have enough interest in that or not for me to throw that in there. You will also get my biggest sleepers, some of these that we're talking about, plus a couple others I may not mention on the video simply because I don't want those in my league to get those. But nonetheless, you will want to win the fantasy draft kits. So be paying attention, because at some point during the video, you do not know when, I am going to give you a clue. So be sure to listen for that. But we're going to get into today's topic, which is sleepers at the running back position. This is a position that is difficult to find talent in the later rounds that you can know for sure that you're going to get solid value out of, because you have the workhorses you draft early on, first, second, third rounds. Then there's a huge drop-off. You have a bunch of guys in, 1A, 1B backfields, guys that are going to be, splitting reps. And then after that, you have guys who are kind of the handcuffs to the stud running backs. And you're kind of just hoping that, the starter will go down. Now, today we're not necessarily talking handcuffs. That isn't what we're talking about. I've gone a totally different direction with these, and I'm going to go with sleepers, not necessarily considered handcuffs per se. Guys that I think are just completely flying under the radar that are going to have a bigger role in the offenses than what people think they may have. And we're going to begin with one, Darrell Henderson, one of my draft crushes. I love this guy coming out. He reminded me of, he's like a mixture of Jamal Charles and Kareem Hunt. The guy is super explosive. He's rated 156 overall on NFL.com, 148 on ESPN. But here's the interesting thing. I was actually watching a video from the Fantasy Headliners a couple weeks ago. Very good. I assume if you're watching this video, if you've even paid attention to anything fantasy football on YouTube, you've probably heard of the Fantasy Headliners. But they do a really good job. I listen to them a lot. But one comparison that they gave was comparing Cam Akers to Darrell Henderson. Now, I'm not using all their exact stats. I just looked these up on Pro Football Reference the day that this is being recorded. Cam Akers last year, 145 carries, had 297 offensive snaps last season, and averaged 4.3 yards per attempt. Now, Darrell Henderson, we've gotten it implanted in our minds that, okay, Akers is just going to be the better fit for Sean McVay's system. He's the guy that's going to be trending up. He's the guy that's going to, just be the, get 80% of the carries, 90% of the carries, whatever the case may be, barring an injury, and this guy's going to dominate the offense. Whatever Malcolm Brown leaves, Cam Akers is going to gain. I'm not so sure about that. Remember, Akers had 145 carries last year. Darrell Henderson only had 138 carries. That's only 7 less than Akers did. He was on the field for 347 offensive snaps, which is 50 more than Cam Akers did. And I do believe that even though Cam Akers can catch the ball, I do believe Henderson is more explosive in that department. We'll see how he is on pass protection. Akers was a little bit more ready coming out as a pass protector than Henderson was. Let's see if he improves in that area. If he can, I think you'll see Henderson on third downs more often than not. But that's very intriguing because Henderson did have more offensive snaps than Akers. Plus, in the carries that Henderson had, we said that Akers averaged 4.3 yards per attempt and his carries. Darrell Henderson had 4.5 yards per attempt on his carries. We've gotten it ingrained that Akers is the more efficient running back, but that was not the case last year. Darrell Henderson actually edged him out, which is very interesting to me. And when you look at with Matthew Stafford coming in, he targets the running backs just about as much as anybody. When he made Theo Riddick relevant in PPR leagues in fantasy football in Detroit. I mean, last year with DeAndre Swift throwing it to him, even if you go back to the time of Reggie Bush, I mean, it didn't matter. Even when they had, Joyke Bell, guys that couldn't catch the ball to save their lives, he would still attempt to throw it to those running backs. And I think that this is going to help Darrell Henderson get on the field a lot more often. As a receiver, Darrell Henderson averaged I believe it was 9.9 yards per reception, which is really good for a running back. So I'm excited to see what he does in this new offense with Matthew Stafford there. I still think he's a really good fit with Sean McVay, despite what everyone else is saying with, Cam Akers. So don't be surprised if Darrell Henderson don't think of him as the number 2 to Cam Akers. Think of him as a guy who is really not even a 1A and 1B, a 1A and 1A backfield, a guy that's going to literally get the same amount of production as Cam Akers. And, we're taking Akers in the second round of our fantasy drafts. Don't be surprised if Darrell Henderson lowers the ceiling of Cam Akers in fantasy football this year. And I believe Henderson is a guy that you can get. He can be a really strong RB3 for you, guy that you can play in the flex depending on the matchup. I really like what he could bring for you this season. My next guy is Salvon Ahmed. And, he's 199 on NFL.com, 161 on ESPN. I know they brought in Malcolm Brown. I know they have Myles Gaskin, who's the projected starter. So a lot of people are saying, well, this could be a 3-way split. The only reason I disagree is because Malcolm Brown, he'll have 1 or 2 good weeks during the year, but that's it. He always disappears for the rest of the year. He may take away a few goal line carries, but that's it. I know they paid him. They're going to bring him in. They're going to use him. But I don't think his role is going to be as big as what people think. Myles Gaskin has had injury concerns. He had a lot of tread on the tires coming out of Washington. Now, Salvon Ahmed did himself. He had a decent amount of carries. But I do like how productive Ahmed was in the opportunities he had last year. I believe he had 4.3 yards per attempt. And, that was the same as Cam Akers had last year. Now, I don't know he's going to have the same opportunities as Cam Akers. Right now he may be the number 3 running back on the depth chart. But I believe that if you see an injury, I think you'll see the same production you saw with Ahmed last year. The Dolphins have continued to rebuild that offensive line. They brought in a guy, Solomon Kinley, last year. They brought in a couple more interior linemen this year. I really like what they're building on the interior of that line. This is a really strong unit for Salvon Ahmed. I believe that he's going to have an opportunity to thrive at some point. It may not be week 1, but if you take him at the end of your draft, especially if if you're in a league that has an extended bench, in Dynasty League, it's up to you because I don't know what, his long-term potential is. But I do believe if you wanted a true sleeper, Salvon Ahmed is a guy who I wouldn't be totally shocked if he was the number 1 running back on that depth chart by the end of the year. And he's going undrafted in a lot of mock drafts right now, a lot of early drafts. So don't be surprised if he takes away a lot more carries from Myles Gaskin and Malcolm Brown, a lot more than what people are expecting. Now, before we go into my final 3, I'm going to give you my question of the day, and we're going to keep it with running backs. Remember, this is not just fantasy football. This is NFL draft. I'm an NFL draft nut, okay? Again, check out all my work behindthesteelcurtain.com. I'm doing draft breakdowns throughout the summer for this upcoming draft. But the 2020 NFL draft, DeAndre Swift was my number 1 running back. This is the question. Who is my number 2 running back? DeAndre Swift was my number 1, my highest rated running back in last year's draft class. Who is my number 2, my second highest rated running back? The first one to give the correct answer in the comment section wins a draft kit when it comes out this July. So put your answer in the comment section. You only get 1 answer, so choose wisely. If you have to go back a year to behindthesteelcurtain.com, in the fan post section, go and look if you want to try hard enough. But it is out there. If you search hard enough, you can find it. Or if not, just give it your best guess. But it is going to be an interesting answer. So be sure to put that in the comment section. We're going to get to my final 3 here. Anthony McFarland, my Pittsburgh Steeler boy. I loved McFarland coming out. I loved watching him in college. But the interesting thing is that Matt Canada is the new offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt Canada was the head coach at Maryland for part of the time that Anthony McFarland was in college. He's ranked 283rd on ESPN. He is not inside NFL's top 200. It's not just the Maryland connection. It is the schematic fit of Matt Canada. He's going to use the motion a lot. I believe they're going to use Anthony McFarland in the slot some as a receiver. They're going to move him around a lot. But, so many Steelers fans are thinking, this guy's done. Well, he's the next Dre Archer. This guy has no chance at all. I cannot stand that Dre Archer comparison. This guy's he's explosive, but he can hold on to the ball. The only thing Steelers fans remember from last year is that one almost like a wheel route, swing pass out of the backfield on that 4th down. I believe it was against Washington last year when he dropped the pass on 4th down when he was wide open. That was really the only thing. When he was running the ball last year, there were no running lanes for anybody last year. That offensive line was pathetic. Sean Sarrett, the offensive line coach, was pathetic. Let's see what Adrian Clem does. They brought back B.J. Finney as depth. They added Kendrick Green, center in the 3rd round, who's going to fit really nicely with Adrian Clem's zone blocking scheme. They just signed Trey Turner to replace David DeCastro. So let's see how this new offensive line look is. I'm not sold on it being completely fixed yet, but I don't believe it's going to be any worse than last year. So let's see what Anthony McFarland can do as the number 2 to Najee Harris. He's going to be the perfect complement. If you're in PPR leagues, take a chance on Anthony McFarland because I think he'll pay big dividends come mid-season, even into the playoffs. The last 2 I'm going to get into, one guy is not being talked about at all. The other guy could be a potential starter. First one is Elijah Mitchell. Nobody's talking about him. Couldn't find him on ESPN's rankings in their top 300 or whatever. Couldn't find him on NFL's top 200. I love this guy coming out. He was my sleeper of this past draft class. Taken in early 7th round, I believe, by San Francisco. It was either late 6th or early 7th round. Ran a 4.38 as his pro day, 5'11", 201 pounds. He played at 218 in college. I expect him to get back up to that weight. I believe he was just losing weight to run a fast 40 time. But this guy is a complete running back. He can pass protect, which is going to be important in Kyle Shanahan's system. He can catch balls out of the backfield. And let's not forget, Jeff Wilson's going to start the season on the PUP list. He's going to miss at least the first 6 weeks of the season. I know they added Trey Sermon, but he's not the best receiver out of the backfield. Raheem Mostert's had his share of injuries. I think Mostert's going to be the starter. I like Mostert in fantasy as well. But if you're talking about the guy who could potentially win the number 2 job to start off the year, I would not be surprised at all if Elijah Mitchell beat out Trey Sermon for the number 2 running back spot. I believe he's a better fit in this offense than Sermon is, and I'm excited to see what he does. This guy has a lot of potential, and behind that pretty good offensive line in San Francisco, I'm excited to see what this guy does. If you're in Dynasty Leagues, this is a deep, deep sleeper I would be willing to take a chance on as well. The last guy we're going to get into is Damien Harris, and this hurts me as a Steelers fan. I don't like giving Patriots players a whole lot of love. But he's ranked 148th on NFL.com, 103rd on ESPN, which isn't as bad. But this guy could possibly be the New England starter. He had 137 carries last season. He only played in 10 games. So, that's 13.7 carries per game last year. The only thing that could potentially cut into his carries is Ramondre Stevenson, who has a similar running style to him. They took him in the 4th round of the draft. But Sony Michel is so injury-prone. I know he's still there. I know James White's there in early downs. But it seems like when Damien Harris was fully healthy last year, he was the guy that Bill Belichick was going to. And I think that's the same case this year. He's not a sure thing by any means. But you could potentially be getting a starter. New England still has a decent offensive line. I believe David Andrews is coming back this year. I don't believe they had him last year. So, just keep that in the back of your head. I believe their offensive line will be improved this year, and that should only help Damien Harris. And if he's healthy, I think he's going to be the starting running back for that team. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Who was my number 2 running back in last year's draft class? My number 1 was DeAndre Swift, but who is number 2? Put your answer in the comment section. The first one to get right wins my draft kit. Until next time, be sure to keep tuning into this channel. Andrew Wilbar, Fantasy Football and NFL Draft. If you've missed any videos so far this year, go back and view previous ones. Until next time, we will see you on the next one. That is the most absurd way to end the video, but my mind has drawn a blank. So have a good one anyways, even though that was the dumbest way to end a video. We'll see you on the next one.